In the video, I'll go through a little bit about how we can think of speaking, public speaking, why it's important to understand what makes a good speaker versus a great speaker, the elements that go into this, and then thinking about why we earmark certain people as the best speakers of our tribes versus people who are good at speaking. So the basic, I think, approach here will be to just outline, this is from just some random website, some basics elements of the speaking, of public speaking in particular. And we go through these and we can apply them to the cases in which I'll raise, and we can discuss and understand that why some people are better at speaking and what that means from an action point of view. It's not enough to just say things and then people listen and go, yep, that's cool, because there's plenty of that. Everyone tunes into news at 6 o'clock to hear that. What we really want is that you would attend a speech by someone spurring you into action. What galvanizes you? How do we come upon that ability to inject the onus on the listener for action? What is required and how that impact can be measured? So I think first of all, it's good to understand that there's an essence of the communicator in all of this. This is why public speaking is so important and impactful for us, is because we like to understand the communicator viscerally from that aura and understood approach of how do I look at this person and feel as if they'll impact my life? Are they a tyrant, tyrannical? Are they positive? Are they trying to manipulate me? What is the essence of them as a person? And how can then I understand them as a communicator to that? It's very easy to look at someone who looks devious and assume that they're going to be perfidious than it is to look at someone who looks noble and understand that they're going to be virtuous in the way they communicate and be upfront and frank with you. These sort of things versus being someone who's very injudicious and angry, choleric, and then get upbraided and reprimanded by them for those things. So this is how we start to approach the first idea, is the communicator is the important part. If I'm an agitator, how do I look like the part that I'm supposed to be playing? Then it goes into the messaging. So when I think about messaging, that's the idea that I'm communicating something. Now that's delivered to an audience, and the audience is then correspondent to wanting to hear or not hear this message. And so usually you attend a speaking event or a public speaker or some political party's conference to hear speakers on these topics, which will allow you to understand their message and how they get it across to you. The important part here, and we can go into this a little bit later, is just what's included in the message and how it's included and what are the techniques applied to the message that are trying to pull at heartstrings or, as I said before, galvanize you into action. The medium is very important. I think in person is obviously the most effective. Any derivation out of that becomes less and less impactful from that basic level of I want to now do something versus that makes me want to explore doing something versus passively listening and doing nothing. The medium itself is readily understood nowadays to be probably video. Most of the messages communicated to you by speakers are ipso facto here, or at least via my own methodologies over video and transmission. So when it is on that type of medium, you lose a certain amount of the personality, the personable nature of the speaker, and then the listener is obviously less pushed towards action. So you are disintegrating what is the effectiveness of speaking. Even watching great public speakers of ages bygone, you will still not have the same impression that would have been felt in an audience in that event, in that arena. So the audience is also important. Being surrounded by an audience gives you and imbues you with an energy that's not felt alone behind a camera and behind a phone screen. These are things that are missed if you are someone who doesn't go out much, but also if you don't understand how politics and political parties operate from a inducement to certain faith beliefs and why certain beacon bearers, demagogues, have so much power over people. Is because if you haven't seen them in person, it's hard to understand what it means to be around someone who has this type of magnetism. And then lastly is the effect. And what does that mean? We can measure that usually by the person's effect, that they're speaking towards a goal, to an outcome, to a modus, to a machination, and that they are allowing the audience, the receivers, to then understand it and try to do something out of it. And that's usually how we analyze cause and effect. We would say like something like Napoleon speaking to his troops in Paris during the revolution is probably quite an impactful effect and then felt that you're going to storm the palace or what have you. So this is how we start to understand these things. And this can go from very low levels up to very, very high levels. So you can just have that soapbox firebrand speaking on a public corner, rabble-rousing, versus if you have what is the perfected elocution and oracular approach of, say, a sophist in the Grecian era, then that's also going to be the sophistication or the levels of performance are the same, but vary in terms of how they're going to be received and by whom. Now, I think the important part here is to also analyze how people speak, because that's also important. So elocution, your oration level, how you have certain diction, and I'd say the way that you have intonation is very important. So all of the ways that you're delivering messages, so how you say them is just as important. This can come to accent. My accent is obviously not one of the good ones. It's very hard to be taken very, very seriously more broadly unless you have a very few amount of accents. Usually that would be the classic American accent or the somewhat posh-ish British accents that you find most prime ministers are then schooled in speaking in a certain way, and they're able to deliver messages fairly well in that conceited way. And that generally the populace appreciates or at least expects from them. You can't have a Glaswegian or a Newcastle or a Birmingham or someone from these areas speak like this as Prime Minister because verily what you'll find is that they are not understood properly, or they're admonished, or they're jested of, because these are kind of funny to our ears to hear these ways because of, obviously they're not that funny, they're just regional and parochial language dialects. But it is the case that we do expect certain things from these people in that way. And this goes into other languages, obviously with Italian and Mussolini and German for Hitler and Russian for Lenin. There are all approaches in their own languages where you have to assume a certain level of these things: elocution, intonation, dialect, pronunciation, things like this. What inflections you use is a very important skill, and you can find that most of the fascist leaders were demagogues in the way that they appreciated how to utilize this the best, inflecting at the crescendos and making sure that the peroration is adroit in how you want to pause, breathe, and then deliver a message. Or if you try to build up to something and then your voice is modulated in that way, so you start softly and quietly and then build with more celerity and rapidity up to a loud shouting triumphant tone. And this we can also appreciate out of something like opera, where they also do the same similar mechanisms around delivering voice to the audience. And so that is a very important part of it. And I think that is probably what you'll find is the separating factor to great versus good. There are many, many, many good public speakers. You'll find that most actors are just really good public speakers. Someone who's a newscaster or someone who's a robo speaker, like politicians typically, something like say Clinton or Obama or George Bush, very robotic speakers in a good way. They delivered messages not very inspiring, not very triumphant, but seem to resonate in the level that was appreciated. They don't need to be rabble-rousing as a demagogue. They need to be delivering a speech that sits with the American public. What this really means is that the American public is lethargic, lackadaisical, and fat, and that you need to deliver a message to that person, and what you get is very mediocre, if we're talking great to good. But in the way that they're able to deliver, it's just resonant and reflective of someone like an actor. And you have that redolence around trying to communicate to the audience rather than trying to communicate your own message. It's to say you're having speech writers write things that have been committee approved, and you have the bromides which are inserted in to make sure that you're only giving out non-important information and all these sort of things, which removes a lot of, obviously, the impactfulness to that. Whereas you'll find it's historically the more vivacious and vital the political party, the more outspoken and generally good rhetorician that your public speaking form would take. So, and this is maybe reminiscent slightly nowadays with someone like Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage has basically coasted on this skill alone. As a politician, he's mediocre, fairly ineffectual, has limited range in terms of policy decisions and general vision. This is hugely hamstringing his political career so far as it goes towards prime ministership, because once you get there by speaking well and rabble-rousing on topics which are relevant, you lose that luster if you're unable to deliver results. You can see more good rather than great speakers like Boris Johnson have this effect where you can come in and be articulate, affable, but then once it's time to pay the piper, so to speak, and you are incapable of actually delivering the promises that you're able to pitch, then what happens is you found, with your pants down basically, that the essence of your speaking does not match the quality of your delivery in the reality, and that's where you lose. The other, what separates that is someone from Lenin or someone from Mussolini or Hitler, is that they delivered what they spoke about. That's what their mission was, it was their drive, and they were passionate about it because it's what they actually truly felt and believed. This is that separation once again. The rabble-rouser on the corner, the demagogue, can deliver messages that are impactful if the doomsayer is spouting off about the benedictions of the god Sigmar. Then he's able to do this from a place of power because he has the faith in it. So he can sit there on the soapbox and deliver it to whomever would be listening in a way that's powerful and impactful. And if you listen and you wanted to hear that message, then it starts to resonate with you in that way that drives you towards action. This does not happen from plain speakers who are just good at delivering either written or recited messages or what have you. This can be thought of some people like Churchill, who is known for obviously practicing his speeches to death, and so obviously a very capable and good public speaker. But then you have, when you listen to his speeches at least, you have, I want to say queasiness when you hear his lisp, and I think he had an affectation on that. He liked it, maybe it ingratiated him to the public in some way, but if you listen to them now, they're not very inspiring speeches. Under the time of duress, it was probably reassuring, but in terms of taking, you could say, the political milieu or like the environment you're in from a 0 to something else. So if I'm saying that there's a disgruntled populace, so we're at a 10 in terms of 10 out of 100 in terms of action at the moment. There's a little few things. I can take this to 90 just with a speech, with some speeches, with some roadshow on my ideas, and then go and speak at beer halls and conventions and expos in this way that drives all these masses to them to listen to what I have to say, to then follow me and then undertake what is my mission. Versus we're under war and it's nice to hear a guy speak well. Okay, great, but that's not that same feel. It's not the same impact. And this can be also said for FDR, quite a good public speaker, the same thing. Nixon as well, just generally a very competent guy. His level of actual ability to his speeches is probably even inverse, where he's much more capable than maybe he was speaking. And then JFK, maybe the opposite, probably a better speaker than he was capable. But that shows you the nice interaction there, and when they obviously both went for president, while JFK was more popular and then Nixon more capable. This can also be seen, this B tier, this good speaker, in someone like Buckley or Hitchens. These are guys who use a lot of their skill and oratorical adroitness in who they're talking to, how they deliver things, making sure that they're comely and using the mores, so being polite, decorum, but also you could say frittering with or flirting with the ideas that are, say, maybe edgy or principled or ideologies, things like this, where you have to turn your messaging into something grander because then it speaks to that, and the people listening to you become inspired. So this, once again, though, flirts much more with the talking head pundit commentariat space, where they do it for a living, it's professional, but it's also not purposeful to drive action. And this is what we're going to reduce all of these guys and their profiles to, is whether they're great public speakers comes down to how much action can you engender in your audience. Your audience has to be gravitating to you to begin with. You can speak to nobody, but in general, if you're a good speaker and you have a powerful message and people are magnetized to you, then you'll have an audience and build on that. So that's how you can start to understand these things. And someone like a comedian like Sam Hyde here doing his very funny TEDx speech is a great example of this, where he's delivering something that's obviously very flippant and almost puerile, but in a way that's impactful in actually other ways, and making you think and pushing your boundaries of comfortability, or maybe you're being made fun of, and it's the satire is something that starts to poison you and hurts you. But in general, this is how the delivery of a speech can be actually more impactful than what you would think a comedian could deliver in that way. Because when you have a soapbox and you have a message to deliver, if you can't be a great speaker like Oswald Mosley, then you can at least mimic it in a way that's different, but also as powerful. And that's what comedians will probably, and actors will emulate when they try to practice their speaking on camera, is how do I come across as being someone with a lot of gravitas and profundity, and how I speak is very impactful. And maybe I'm booming my voice, or maybe I'm soft and quiet, moderate, modulated. Someone like Margaret Thatcher had that ability to sink and draw in, you would think, ears and audience into the way that she spoke because of the diction and because of her pronunciation and elocution. And she would talk like this. And you can see that there was very practiced, which, once again, is a good public speaker, but not a great public speaker. Then I think my own peroration on this will be around the importance of being powerful as a man first, then speaking as a great speaker second to that. It's meant to draw out your spirit in that way. If you are performing, or you're providing everyone with an insight to yourself, which is what speaking is, it's letting the inside out, then it is important that you have things like gesticulation. Your body language is approaching for you, and you can see this, I think Mussolini probably hammered this home the best, is that you want to engender feeling around your own body and how it's your disposition, your countenance, your visage is able to hold an audience to them and make sure the eyeballs are, as much as the ears, locked onto you. You have the ability to draw all of this attention to yourself for long periods of time, because everyone's really excited on the edge of their seat to hear what you have to say. And that helps when you have the, if you are loquacious, you have a certain level of bloviating or what have you. But if you have the correct and succinct verbiage, where you're trying to deliver a very particular message in a powerful way, and it's enunciated and it's delivered, and then you're able to move on to a new point that has quite a general good flow, then you can see how the effect can compound, and you can build on what are 5, 6 very important messages over 2 hours to deliver to an audience who's then exhausted but elated, and they'll try to maybe psychically stew in this feeling for a day or two, and then decide to join your forces, or whatever the mission, as I said, once again, that you're trying to imbue them with is. The equivalent here to Americans, I think nowadays specifically, is on sports speeches. So a head coach delivering the impactful pre-game speech where he's pumping everybody up, making sure that they're all G'd up and geared towards victory. This is the American equivalent nowadays of the politics of the European past. How do we bring these people together to form what is an army or a body of troop or some massive action? This is how that's done. This is how we manifest it in the modern age. And obviously it's pathetic from a historical action point of view, having all your energies exerted in a sport like that, and particularly if you have the sharpest minds and the greatest athletes whiling away their days for money rather than anything more important, then obviously you're losing a lot with that. But in general, that's how we can start to think about modern escapism, is related to how all our best speakers and speeches and minds gravitate towards things that give them money rather than political importance, or something like standing in front of a court and speaking, or more grander, you say, notions of hosting a dinner party for diplomats, or if it is being an opera singer or something like this. So that's it. That's hopefully helpful in understanding why you should be a good communicator, practicing elocution lessons given either by someone or just analysis by yourself, making sure that when you are speaking, you're trying to enunciate. It is difficult. I myself am not a good public speaker like that, at that level. Obviously, it's easy to say rather than to do, but I think practice is obviously one of those things that just allows you maybe to build confidence, where you've spoken in front of 10 or 20, then 200 doesn't seem that bad. And that will hopefully help you on your way to being president or the leader of a paramilitary or whatever it is your current mission is.